right. Along with TJ Eckert, I am Colby Daniels. I have an echo in my ear, but we're going to march on. Game number 1 is in the books. It is Oklahoma 51, Temple 3. TJ, there's a lot to discuss in terms of the offense, the defense, the good, the bad, and the ugly, if you will.
Yeah.
Where do you want to begin? Because I think we could say a lot of really good things about the defense. I think there are maybe questions about the offense. We promise we're not going to do the overreaction thing, but there are definitely things that happen tonight offensively that we have to ask questions about. So where do you want to start?
Let's do the offense. Let's
All
overreact.
Right,
let's overreact
let's jump
right now.
into it. Fire all the coordinators.
Mike Hawkins should be starting.
Let's change personnel. No, it's look, brand new quarterback, right? Taking the reins officially over this football team. You have a new offensive coordinator. You have a lot of pieces that are stepping into a bigger role for the first time. You're without some of your big playmakers in this game.
Yeah.
I thought maybe something that happened in this game that I don't know how many people have thought about a lot, but Branson Hickman going down early in this game, the starting center for Oklahoma, I thought was really significant because we saw this team struggle to run the football on demand. And, I'm not saying there's a giant drop-off from the first center to the second center. I'm saying we don't know. And when he leaves the game and you struggle to run the football without your ideal starting five, that's something to just monitor going forward.
Well, and the center is the quarterback of that offensive line, right? And so imagine the Chiefs losing Creed Humphrey. That's hard. And so that's tough. You have to shuffle that offensive line around a lot. I think Jacob Sexton went from a tackle position to a guard position. They moved that guard to center. They had to move, so there was a lot of things they had to do in terms of not just bringing guys off the bench. They had to really Bill Bedenbaugh, we've talked about it, that's the guy you want to have leading that unit. He had to do a lot of shuffling to make this thing work, and so that was a concern. The push up front was something that we were wondering about coming in. Didn't feel like they got much at all. Most of the rushing yards, if you will, came, I think, late in the game. Mike Hawkins had some nice. Taylor Tatum had a couple that busted off there as well. So if there is a concern, that was it coming in, and then I think that's still the question coming out of it. I know we're going to talk about third downs. They were 0 for 10 at one point, 1 for 11, 1 for 12.
1 for 12,
I think was the final one. So, you look at the third. We were talking about this walking up the tunnel after the game. You look at third downs, and you think, well, you just aren't very good on third down. Well, you got to be good on first and second down to be good on third down, and most of OU's third downs tonight against Temple were 3rd and 7 or more. And so that's hard to convert a lot, regardless of who you're playing, especially with a new quarterback and especially with a shaky offensive line. So that was really negative. They won 51-3, by the way. I don't know if we've mentioned that or if you saw that. So there's lots of positives to talk about, but there are questions I think that need to be addressed, like you mentioned.
Yeah, look, Sooner Nation is going to talk about this for the next week until they take the football field again, and there's going to be questions about the offense, about the offensive line, the ability to run the football on demand. I think, they were given a lot of really friendly field position situations all night, which I think led to the 51. What happens if you aren't, though, right? Because, again, you look at those third down numbers, and to your point, you didn't have a lot of third and manageables, and that's because you're not having success on the early downs. I do remember 1 or 2 third and shorts where they tried to run the football and didn't pick those up either. Again, I don't think it's panic mode by any means. They have a ton of talented running backs, and we really saw the freshman late in the game stretch his legs a little bit, which has to excite Sooner fans. But, the offensive line is a group of new guys that are developing chemistry, that are all getting new opportunities within a new offense, and it's going to be something, I think, in the early portion of this season that they're going to have to just develop.
I think, I'm going to look it up just to make sure. Jake Taylor, I believe, is one of the guys that is expected to start on the offensive line. I don't think he played tonight. I'm going to make sure, he did not suit up. So I think that's a guy that you were expecting maybe to play more, and he didn't. So there's another guy you can kind of slide in there. Gentry Williams got held out as well. Woody Washington, I don't think, played much at all. So those are on the defensive side. But talking about the offensive line, there's some other guys in that position group that didn't play. Focus on some positives. Deion Burks, 3 receiving touchdowns in his debut. He looked good. Chemistry looked good with Jackson Arnold. That was nice. First Sooner receiver to ever have 3 receiving touchdowns in his debut, so that was good.
He's now played 2 games in this stadium, right, when you count the spring game and this game. And how many touchdowns is that? What did he score, 2 or 3 in the spring game?
Yeah. That's a good
touchdown machine inside Gaylord Memorial Stadium.
That's a good average, by the way. If you have 3 in the spring game and 3, that's 3 a game. Let's see what other positives were there from the Bauer Sharp looked good. Honestly, Jackson Arnold looked fine, right? He looked poised.
I think so.
A few times when he got under pressure, it looked like he did an okay job keeping his eyes downfield. There was a few times I was texting one of my buddies. Jackson Anthony, by the way, shout out Jackson, that it was bothering me a little bit that a few times he felt pressure and his eyes went down. You know, as a quarterback, keep your eyes up and look for your receivers when you're under duress. When your eyes start to go down, that's when you've taken away any opportunity you have to throw it, right? And so there's a couple times I saw Jackson Arnold do that tonight. Keep an eye on that going forward. I'm not sure if that's an issue or not, but yeah, for the most part,
it could also be him wanting to establish some sort of run game, right?
It could be.
And when he did run the ball, he was successful.
And to the point about third downs, that was a negative stat. People will look at the total yards. I think the passing yardage number was the lowest since that Texas game with Davis Bevel, so that's scary. But
short
fields. That's exactly right. So if Sooner fans look at the box score and say, man, we only had, 100 and something passing yards, like that's not very good. Well, pay attention to where you were starting field. They scored right before half from like the 7-yard line or whatever that was, right after a fumble. So I think a lot of good from the offense, a lot more question marks on that side than maybe on the defense.
Yeah, and I will say this about Jackson Arnold as well. I think the final numbers were 13 of 19 passing.
Something like that.
He had no turnovers, right, which is a good thing. I know that was something that was talked about this entire offseason, the turnover issues.
Yeah.
13 of 19 isn't going to wow anybody, but, if that is 17 of 19, it's a completely different conversation.
Sure.
And Brent Venables said in his postgame press conference, 4 drops tonight obviously didn't help the offense move the chains in some of those possessions, and ultimately leads to the third down numbers. It also leads to a stat line for Jackson Arnold that maybe is underwhelming in terms of having a really high completion percentage, but I thought he looked in command. And look, I know that this is the type of opponent that physically isn't going to bring something to really challenge Jackson Arnold, but in terms of him just being a leader and looking calm and managing the offense, that's really what you worry about with a young guy, and that's what leads to turnovers. And I thought he looked the part tonight. He looked very decisive with his decision making, and again, you have those 4 drop passes turning into completions, 17 of 19, 4 touchdowns. I think Sooner fans are very happy with that.
Yeah, and we've talked so much about this. It's been my kind of my go-to phrase throughout the off season going into this year is like, we know your good's going to be good, but how good is your bad? And not turning the ball over was great. He threw the ball away a couple times, which was nice. Yeah. He didn't take too many unnecessary sacks. Some were probably inevitable. Without looking at like the wide angle, it's hard to tell if he's missing wide open receivers when he was taking a couple sacks there. But I think for the most part, you would be pleased with the performance from Jackson Arnold, and you're okay with the performance from the offense. You just want to see a little bit more continuity with that offensive line. That's something that's just going to have to take time.
That's right. It's something you develop. Those 5 guys, whatever 5 guys that ends up being, consistently are going to have to, mesh together. And again, we don't really know that we saw their best 5 guys out there tonight.
Yeah,
so that's something just to pay attention to going forward. Before we completely switch from the offense, I do want to mention the receiver position, because I think this entire offseason, I talked about Oklahoma having arguably one of the deepest wide receiver rooms in all of college football.
Sure,
in terms of just high-end talent. They had a bunch of guys, and one of the questions is, how are you going to make all these guys happy? There's one football. You got to get all these guys involved. Jaden Gibson goes down with an injury in fall camp. He's out. Nick Anderson, he's not out for a long time. The word is he's been a little bit banged up, and this was probably precautionary.
Yeah, why not?
He didn't play tonight. You have Andrell Anthony coming back from a season-ending injury, so, I don't know if he's at 100%. Even if he is, mentally he might just be working his way back into the game form that we last saw him. And then to add insult to injury, all of a sudden Jalil Farouk goes down. He's out for 6 to 8 weeks. Tonight, Brent Venables confirming in his press conference, you go from an incredibly deep receiver room to all of a sudden, if Nick Anderson has some lingering issues, you're talking about having to maybe rely on some players that you didn't expect to speed up their learning process.
Right, or the tight ends, right? Maybe Bauer Sharp gets more involved than he was tonight, broken foot, I think is what it was for Jalil Farouk. So he'll be out for 6 to 8 weeks. Andrell Anthony did play. I think he had at least 1 catch. I think he dropped 1 as well earlier in the game. But you're leaning on Deion Burks. Brennan Thompson had some catches tonight, but didn't get fully involved in the offense. So that's another guy you're probably going to have to rely on as well.
J.J. Hester. Still has a big ceiling.
He does, and had a couple drops tonight. And I know he's frustrated with that, but that's another guy you're going to have to lean on, I think, with this offense, especially with the wide receiver room looking a little depleted. So, pay attention to how long Nick Anderson's out. Maybe he gets brought back in the Houston game and kind of eased back into it. You still got Tulane as well to kind of get ready for Tennessee coming here in a couple weeks. So you're right, though. All off season long, we've talked about how excited we were for this wide receiver room, and now you're looking at it like, well, shoot, you got some guys that are banged up, and I think we hit on this maybe in the pregame. If there was a position group to get banged up, you feel most confident with that one, right? Maybe the linebacker room, there's a bunch of guys in there that you feel good about too. But the wide receiver room is deep, and it's good, A, because you have a bunch of guys you can throw it to, but then B, if you get hurt or have some injury issues, you have guys that can fill in. So that'll be something to keep an eye on.
It's once again a reminder, though, that you can never have enough depth,
no.
right? Like, you always look at the depth and just think, like, we're good forever. And it doesn't take long, a couple injuries, and all of a sudden that depth looks less and less, just over the top, glorious, like it did, this offseason. But they're fine. I mean, you have D. Burks out there. I think you're going to be okay.
He looked okay.
And I do appreciate the fact that they made it a point to target Bauer Sharp.
Yeah.
I think he had the second most targets tonight. And tight end is one of those positions that in college football it's just underutilized for some weird reason. I don't understand it, but tight ends in college football are such big mismatches. And, we saw it in Tulsa last night. I know Utah in their game had Brant Keithy back from an injury. He had 3 touchdown receptions.
There you go.
I mean, Bauer Sharp to me looked really good, and I think he's going to be a mismatch issue for opponents. So I like the fact that they made it a point to get him involved.
Oh, you really hadn't had a true receiving tight end in a long time, right? Austin Stogner was a tight end, but I wouldn't call him a receiving tight end. He was a little limited athletically.
Right.
Jeremiah Hall was a great receiver, but he was more of an H-back, fullback type guy. And so you kind of keep going back. Maybe Braden Willis you could look at as maybe being the last guy that they've had. So anyway, if you can develop that also helps that wide receiver room too.
No doubt. All right, let's talk about the defense. That's obviously what's going to be in the headlines all week. Defensive dominance.
Yeah.
From start to finish, right? They were fantastic. Turnovers, pressuring the quarterback, stopping the run game. I just thought in general, the mentality feels like it's in a completely different place defensively.
Yeah.
The motor that you feel like all 11 players play with feels like it's in a completely different place than where we were with Oklahoma, 3, 4, 5 years
Definitely.
ago. It's come a long way in a short amount of time, and I think that is Brent Venables' fingerprints being all over it.
I think the concern we had with the offensive line and the ability they could establish dominance up front was matched with the confidence that we had in the defensive line being able to do that. So, and it happened tonight, right? It felt like the defensive line was so active from really the first snap, whether it was getting push up front, whether it was getting pressure on the quarterback. You mentioned that. They got some sacks. They got home on a few. But, the sack stat is great. But you pay attention to hurries or pressures or hits on the quarterback, whatever. Disruption is really the stat that a lot of in fact, I asked at fall camp for Tulsa. That's the stat they look at during fall camp is disruptions. And that's a big deal because as a quarterback, getting sacks suck, but getting hit a lot sucks more. And so when you know that you're going to get hit a lot, that can throw you off more so than knowing I need to get rid of the ball or I'm going to get sacked. And so defensive line was impressive. Didn't talk about the secondary, which is probably a good thing, right? It means that they were playing well. They were all over the wide receivers there for Temple, which we kind of expected, and doing it without really their 2 top corners, right? Gentry Williams and Woody Washington both didn't play tonight, and so I don't think they played, and if they did, it was very little. That's what they were talking about on social media, and what Brent Venables said in postgame was that they held out some of their guys because they didn't feel like they needed them, and so that was good. And the linebacker room was fine. It looked like they were causing some chaos too. And so was it 6 sacks? You read that stat
6
earlier.
sacks, yep.
6 sacks
by this team.
6 turnovers.
6 turnovers. First time since 2003 the Sooners have forced 6 turnovers in a game.
And 5 of them technically by the defense, right? One was on punt.
Yeah.
They got a punt
return,
fumble.
Jaron Koenig scoop and score.
Yeah. That was cool. It was right to us.
Yeah. Right in front of our faces.
Right in front of our faces, not the cameras. But we won't talk about that.
I like the interior of the defensive line because you mentioned being a quarterback and the pressure that you're going to see. And I think when people think about pressuring the quarterback, people naturally think about the edge rush.
Edges, yeah.
And look, edge rush is great, right? Everybody wants a great edge rusher. When you get pressure on the interior, though, you can work with playing against a great edge rusher. When it comes from the middle, though, that's where we talk about the disruption, and the entire play just breaks down.
That's
from the snap. And I thought their interior disruption tonight was outstanding. I know the 2 starters, Jaden Jackson and Dominic Williams, looked exceptional when they were in there.
Especially, yeah.
But Ashton Sanders and Grayson Halton.
Grayson Halton had a sack.
David Stone, when he had his
got involved.
opportunities, looked like he was disrupting plays. across the board, I thought the interior guys, to me, really stood out.
That's a great point, because having pressure in your face from the interior is so hard as a quarterback, because when you feel edge rush, you can step up into the pocket.
Right.
When there's something in your face, you really don't have anywhere to go, and that's really hard to do. And when you hear coaches talking about getting pressure without blitzing, it's not because they have a great edge rusher. It's because they have great interior pressure. And so if that's something that continues for the Sooners, expected it tonight, probably expect it the next couple weeks, but if it can continue in the SEC play and you get pressure with 4, that's a really big deal. And so I'd be curious to see how that continues, because tonight was a great first step in that. You mentioned the motor. The energy around the defense was great, really, from the first snap all the way through to the end, honestly. They did a great job. Even the second and third team, younger guys, when they came in, it was like a concerted effort to, really keep tempo off the scoreboard. Unfortunately, they got 3.
Brent Venables would have lost his mind if they had allowed something late,
I think that was the big highlight for me. It was the big storyline for us coming in, was that the defense was probably going to end up carrying this team. And if that's the case, then back to Jackson Arnold, you don't need him to be a Heisman winner. You just need him to not turn the ball over, not make stupid decisions, because you have, if this is the case, again, it's not overreacting, because we're not doing that. It's Temple, but the defense appeared to meet the hype that we had given them coming in from the offseason.
Yeah, I think in terms of spinning this defense forward, they've had good edge rushers in the past. They've had a lot of bad defenses, but they've had good edge rushers at times. That doesn't necessarily equate to great defense. And if these how many great interior guys have they had for the last 10 years? I mean, it's very few and far between. And I think spinning it forward, you like to see the depth they have at that position. You have to be able to rotate those guys every time you take the field. New guys, fresh bodies, especially when they're that big, right? They can't just go out there and play any snaps. So the ability to just rotate those guys, keep fresh interior defensive linemen, and be disruptive, to me, that not only is the biggest thing tonight, but I think spinning it forward, that's going to be something that's got to be a constant if this defense is going to do what everybody expects it to do, especially when you enter SEC play.
Keep an eye on, for me going forward, talk about going forward, going into Houston, pay attention to who the offensive line guys are, who's starting up front, and don't necessarily keep your eye on rushing yards. I think that's the thing. It's a hard stat to quantify, because you can rush for a lot of yards, but your running back might just be all world at breaking tackles. Pay attention to the push up front. Pay attention to when Sawchuk, Barnes, pay attention to when they get hit first, right? Yeah.
Can you pick up a first down?
You need to move the defensive line 2 yards. Yeah. So pay attention to that in the Houston game. We'll talk more about it as the week progresses, but pay attention to when these guys are getting hit first, right? If they're getting hit in the backfield, then that's an offensive line thing. If they're getting hit downfield, then that shows you that they're doing a much better job. I will say it's hard for us to follow, because we're on the field looking through a camera. But looking at some replays, there was a few times where I thought the offensive line did a good job. I know we're switching over from defense, but the offensive line did a good job getting some, not push, but working up to the second level of the defense, which is something that is good to see. So pay attention to that, see if they continue doing a good job of working together to work to the second level, talking about the linebackers in the secondary. That's something that you really need to do if you're going to get any push up front. And if you're not, then you're going to have guards and tackles in your backfield, and that makes it hard on the running backs. So.
I think Gavin Sawchuk and Javonte Barnes are terrific players, and they're going to get more opportunities going forward. But my question is, did Taylor Tatum earn more opportunities? Obviously next week is a much tougher opponent than they saw tonight, and maybe you don't have the ability to play as many players on both sides of the football as they played tonight. But he definitely, offensive line aside, he definitely looked like a guy that had tremendous burst when he got opportunities.
I wouldn't be surprised to see him get more run. And you have 4 games to burn, so why not keep throwing him out there? And if he continues to play well, then maybe you don't redshirt him and you play him in the SEC. But I think he played great. He showed some juice. Who was the other kid that came? Sam Franklin, yeah.
It was a UTSA transfer?
He looked good.
Or UTEP?
UTEP. And he showed some burst, too. So there was a few guys tonight that looked pretty solid for a running back room that we weren't concerned about, but wasn't one that we were like, that's one we need to hang our hat on in terms of the strength. So that was good to see. Obviously, Houston, you mentioned coming up next, so a little bit tougher of an opponent. Tomorrow we do have Oklahoma State and South Dakota State.
That's right. And we will be doing this bright and early from Stillwater in the morning.
What's your bright and early, though?
Well, I will probably be up at 6,
okay,
but we will be streaming at
like 11?
Around 11-ish. So
okay.
I'm excited to talk Oklahoma State and South Dakota State. And Some people act like this is going to be one of the better, like, upset chances of the entire college football weekend. I know the point spread, last I looked this morning, was 9.5, 10, depending on what sports book you look at. South Dakota State is the defending two-time FCS champions. They've won 29 straight. They have talent, and they have a heck of a quarterback. So, they have a fighter's chance without a doubt. Oklahoma, we'll talk about this tomorrow, but I'm excited to see how Oklahoma State goes into an opener against a team that obviously is getting a little bit of headlines and is going to warrant their full attention.
A lot of respect for South Dakota State. By the way, before we get out, OU did cover tonight, right? I believe it was like 40. It was 43.5 or something like that. So let's see. It was 44-3. That's 41. I believe the line was either 41.5 or 42. And then they scored that touchdown late to end up covering.
What was your score prediction?
Not close. 67-13 was mine. You said 70-3.
I said 70-3. So
you got the 3.
I had the defensive side of the equation right.
Yeah, that was good.
The offense didn't closely
good teams win.
Mirror what I saw in my head when I was making that pregame prediction.
Good teams win, great teams cover. So OU did that
there
tonight.
You go.
1-0 in the official standings, and then also 1-0. In Vegas as well.
That's right. Game 1 in the books. It's crazy that we spent 8 months counting down to game number 1 in the football season, and it feels like it's an eternity. And then just like that, you've already got one done.
And you prepare for game 2.
Immediately start looking forward to next week. And we're excited that, it's a step up in competition.
Yeah.
And I'm sure this week will be a lot of fun for Brent Venables and the coaching staff. So. That's it for us. We're going to get out of here. I think they're probably going to shut the lights out on us very, very shortly. We're going to head for the exits. That's TJ Eckert. I am Colby Daniels. Once again, around 11 a.m. tomorrow in Stillwater to talk Oklahoma State, South Dakota State. It's a final from Norman, 51-3 Sooners in game number 1 of this 2024 season.
All right.
That was good.